As I just said, it's now 2 months since the unspeakable horrors of the Hamas terrorist attack were unleashed on vulnerable communities in southern Israel. I'll show you in a moment the gut-churning interpretations some people are promoting of those October the 7th atrocities. For now, the fighting and trauma continues in Gaza as Israel tries to eliminate Hamas terrorists. The bombings in Gaza are intense and undoubtedly and tragically there will be civilian casualties, but the number of innocents killed is unknown, and any numbers coming out of Gaza are controlled by Hamas and simply cannot be trusted. They form part of the terror group's propaganda war, and too many in the media and elsewhere are happy to parrot their numbers and echo their claims. This is how it always plays out in the Middle East. Terror groups subject Israel to random attacks and violence. Then when Israel responds, the terror propagandists turn the world against Israel, always claiming the response is disproportionate, always inflating civilian casualties, always deliberately placing civilians in harm's way, and always getting the UN and the media to amplify their propaganda claims that make Israel the villain. Islamist extremist groups only exist to eradicate Israel and the Jewish people. That's in the Hamas Charter. Hamas is not interested in a two-state solution. They cannot abide coexistence. Yet they manage to marshal public support, particularly from the political left, as if they represent Palestinian aspirations for statehood. Hamas are not an organisation for Palestinian aspiration. They are a bloodthirsty Islamist terror group. And it's hard to fathom how the world now pretends that Hamas is somehow a legitimate vehicle for Palestinian ambitions when you consider how the current war started. It seems that many of the protesters or useful idiots in the West either don't know the facts or simply ignore them. Gaza was not occupied by Israel on October the 7th. Israel ended its occupation of Gaza 15 years ago, forcibly removing all the Jewish families who were living in Gaza and didn't want to leave. For years, instead of embracing their freedom, building their economy and forging their future, the people of Gaza elected Hamas to lead them. And Hamas set about firing deadly rockets into Israel, killing, injuring and terrorising random civilians. And Hamas has built tunnels, it's commandeered aid allocations, accumulated weapons, and it's crushed any dissent on the threat of death. And on October the 7th this year, on a peaceful morning, unprovoked, Hamas terrorists left Gaza and went into Israel. And what they did there was not an act of liberation. It was not an act of military resistance against an occupier. It was not an attempt to weaken military installations or surveillance. It was a blood-curdling terrorist attack on men, women and children, innocents who were tortured, raped and murdered. And while the media is full of untested claims about civilian deaths in Gaza, claims we know are either false or grossly exaggerated. Remember the lies about the hospital. Well, while the media runs all this, they do not share the facts, the known facts, the videotaped, corroborated and sickening facts of October the 7th. That's partly because the facts are too traumatic, too graphic to show, but even too depraved to talk about. I've seen much of it on video and I've seen eyewitness accounts that are just too disturbing to broadcast and that I can never unremember. So instead, have a look at a journalist's account of what he saw on video and a warning, even this is distressing.
Children are being hunted down and killed. There are old people who are hunted down and killed. I mean, like running through a village, trying to find them and then killing them and then continuing to shoot them after their death. What became of some of the people we didn't see die? We saw children who were covered in blood, who were blinded, who had lost their parents, and this is really horrible stuff.
Just horrific, and that's the stuff we can show you. That's not too bad, not too disturbing. And the Hamas atrocities were especially disgusting against women. There was rape and sexual violence too horrific to describe on air, and none other than Hillary Clinton has called out those who ignore it.
Many women and girls were attacked brutally by Hamas on October 7th, and they have testified to the gender-based violence that they both experienced and witnessed. It is outrageous that some who claim to stand for justice are closing their eyes and their hearts to the victims of Hamas.
And don't forget, never forget the hostages. We've seen the video footage, some of it shot by the terrorists themselves as they took young women at gunpoint and even mothers and their babies. Some have been traded back to Israel in exchange for the release of Palestinian criminals. Others have been killed. Another 138 still await their fate. This is not the act of an oppressed people seeking freedom. This is not a reaction to being occupied. Yet at New York's Columbia University, one planned student event referred to October the 7th as a counter-offensive. A counter-offensive. What a disgusting insult to the babies, young women, mothers and fathers slaughtered for nothing other than being Jewish. That event has been cancelled or at least renamed, but the sentiment seems widespread, especially in universities. It's sickening. Listen to these students at the same university glorifying this terrorism as some kind of revolutionary act.
On October 7th, the Palestinian liberation fighters demonstrated their refusal to be dominated. They showed the world that the Palestinian people will fight for freedom instead of quietly adapting to subjugation. They showed us that through creativity, determination, and combined strength, the masses can accomplish great feats, a fact we have seen in every heroic struggle for liberation from Vietnam to Afghanistan. As Mao says, dare to struggle, dare to win.
For these sickos, these fools, this is their Vietnam. And listen to this student from Boston, a young woman with a Jewish mother and a Muslim father, no less, and hear the repulsive attitudes that she's encountered.
For my part, I was forced to leave my study group for my doctoral exams halfway through the semester because my group members told me that the people at the Nova Music Festival deserved to die because they were partying on stolen land.
What is happening in liberal democracies when this sort of anti-Semitism, this sort of irrational hatred is rushing so easily to the surface? The animalistic atrocity of October the 7th should not be used by anyone, including activists in the West, to push the political aim of Palestinian statehood. This was a deliberate attempt to inspire Islamist extremism and Jew hatred everywhere and to ensure that bloodshed and chaos continues in the Middle East. The loudest calls now should be for Hamas to release all hostages immediately. Until Hamas hands back every hostage and stops firing rockets and bullets at Israel, it cannot rationally portray Israel as the aggressor.